Hello, good night, all. Uh, Welcome to this additional session that I have put in. I know it's a Friday evening and all that, but what's got to be done's got to be done, as they say. Now, what we'll be starting today is this important area of foreign exchange risk management. You may recall, okay, in your syllabus that treasury matters, treasury issues, and risk management are very important topics. Well, it is actually one big topic, and it includes currency risk management, interest rate risk management, which are two, big areas. Now, you need to be aware of all the various hedging techniques which can be used for a firm to protect itself against currency risk exposure, and as well as you need to know the relevant techniques to be used for a firm to protect itself against adverse movements in interest rates. And we will be looking at foreign currency risk exposure first. Before we actually get in, okay, to the risk exposure and getting a few things out of the way, I did emphasize to you that some of the stuff we look at today are revision areas. Now, it's not possible, although I try to do it as quickly as possible, but it's not possible to do back the basic hedging techniques in detail. That's the reason why I've put up all the relevant handouts in the classroom, because those are things which are done at F9, and really there is so much to be done with the advanced hedging techniques, the futures, the options, the swaps, and so forth, that if we were to do back everything, we simply would not finish. But we'll try to kill two birds with one stone and go through it as quickly as possible, and look at a few simple questions, and then as we move on, we'll see it in a more P4 examined way. Now, I say simple questions. These questions are meant just to refresh your memory as to how the basic hedges are carried out. That's the money market hedge and the forward hedge. And these questions are actually F9 questions. And as I said, the purpose of using them is simply to, jog your memory in case you've forgotten any of those things. As we get on into the advanced hedging techniques, you will see that questions would often ask you to do a money market hedge and a forward hedge as well. So you need to know the techniques well. Now, any technique which is examined at F9 and is also examined at P4, and that would include a forward hedge and a money market hedge, the examiner expects you to know this, almost perfectly, because it is tested there, and obviously, you would have done it there. Well, so he assumes, and he expects you to know it well. So we will be going through those things. Now, before that, the one of the handouts which I sent you, because there are a few things we need to get out of the way. Let me see if I can find it here. Yeah, I sent you this handout as well. Now, for those of you all, again, who may have done F9 a while ago, or who may not have done F9 at all, this handout, okay, is one which is intended to just review the basics of exchange rates. For example, what is a direct quote, what is an indirect quote, what is a selling rate, what is a buying rate, how do you know when you're selling, and how do you know when you're buying, which rate is to be used, and so forth. And the reason why I always use this handout as an introduction is because what I found in the past is that students, even at P4, maybe because they didn't do it in the earlier paper, or maybe because it's there but they simply didn't study the topic, but students may sometimes have problems even at P4 in working out these basic things. For example, if a UK firm buys goods from a US firm and is invoiced in dollars, which means the UK firm has exchange rate risk. Let's say the invoice has to be settled in 3 months' time. Then, you have to know what is the selling rate and what is the buying rate. Now, the problem there, of course, is that in the UK, the indirect quotation system is used, and it's opposite to what we use here in the Caribbean. And I think that is one of the areas of concern, okay, for students. And it is one as simple as it is. Okay, some students may still make mistakes when doing the calculations. Remember, as I said, the systems are different. In Trinidad, we use the direct quote system, and the direct quote system, as you see here, okay, shows the units of domestic currency per single unit of the foreign currency. So, for example, if you go to the bank and you see the US rate against the TT rate, that you will see it as maybe 6.45. Let's say. Now, that means 6.45 TT per dollar. So, you see in here the direct system shows the units of domestic currency for 1 unit of the foreign currency, 1 unit being a dollar. Now, with the indirect system, it's the reverse. We show the units of the foreign currency per single unit of the domestic. So if we were using the indirect system in Trinidad, okay, what you'd probably see is not 6.45 TT for 1 US, but so many cents for 1 TT, because the number of units are the foreign currency. And of course, to find that, you simply invert the rates 1 over 6.45, and that would give you the number of US cents for a TT dollar. And that is how, okay, it is quoted in the UK. And because of that, the selling and buying rules are opposite, in that, okay, banks would sell low and buy high, and that is very, very important. It's not as though they will make a loss if they do that. In fact, quite to the contrary, okay, if they did it the other way around, they will make a loss, because it is the indirect system. Now, this should not be difficult for you to follow, because after all, if the rates are turned around and inverted, logically we may think that the selling and buying rules would also be, turned around. You can think of it like that, and that's how it is. Okay, so you need to know that, for example, to start off with, banks would always sell low and buy high. The examiner would always use the indirect quote system in the exam, and although using the direct quote system and the indirect quote system, you'll still end up with the same answer, because they are just two different systems. You understand? I mean, if Trinidad on Monday, with all these changes taking place and all that, if Trinidad on Monday decided to switch to the indirect quote system, that does not mean that the TT dollar is no longer the currency. That does not mean that the rate against the TT dollar and the US dollar would be any different as such. Well, apart from normal, fluctuations, which would usually be there, nothing changes. It's simply the way in which it will be quoted. Because you see, globally, there are only two quotation systems. Some countries use the direct quote system, some use the indirect quote system. But regardless of which one is used, if a transaction is carried out, it's the same currency the country has. It hasn't changed its currency. So if a transaction is carried out, the end result will be the same. You see? So that does not change. And this is something, again, that without taking anything for granted, students would sometimes even make little mistakes with that. Now, the examiner, as I said, expects you to use the indirect quote system. Although you can use the direct quote system and work towards the indirect quote system, because the two will give you the same answer eventually, you shouldn't do that, because it's not right. I mean, when I say it's not right, he expects you to use the indirect quote system. It's as simple as that. So if you were to say, well, I remember he said in class, whichever one we use, we'll get the same answer, so I will use the direct. Well, there's a good chance that you may make a mistake to start with, because I'll tell you why. You will be working with the direct quote system, but the way in which the rates are given, okay, is opposite. The rate itself and the quote is opposite. In other words, if you work with the direct quote system, you will think like how we think in Trinidad, okay, in that the banks sell high and buy low, because you are thinking direct. Whereas if the indirect system is used, because everything is turned around, the bank sell low and buy high, and therefore he will give you the rate accordingly, as you will see. So if you choose to use direct and use the rates that he gives you, there is a pretty good chance you'll mess it up. Okay, because you'll not be working like with like. You'll be working in the direct calculation, direct quote calculation with an indirect quote. So don't do that. Your best bet, you need to use the indirect. You need to forget about the direct, use the indirect, and that's it. Okay, final. All right. Now, um, I know what I'm telling you about moving from one to the other, because I have had situations in the past with students um, who would have attended a revision course, whether face to face or in the past when I lectured face to face or online, and the students, they never bothered to, well, I wouldn't say never bothered, but they didn't realize that they were two entirely different things, and they continued to use one. And in the class, okay, they would have tons of problem figuring out, well, what on earth is he calculating? Surely a mistake has been made there. So you see, you need to understand that. Now, in this handout, as I said, which really is the same handout that I use at F9 when I teach the thing for the first time, okay, um, yeah, what you're seeing is I've given you, it's a good handout in showing you how to do the calculations. Banks, as I said, always sell low and buy high, okay, always. And in deciding how to work out a calculation, there are only two rules that you use: a divide rule and a multiply rule. Okay, generally you will have to divide. So banks sell low and buy high. Now I have some examples here, as I said, just recapping. Okay, how we work out the different things. Anytime you're in doubt, remember, if you take a certain sum of money, okay, and let's assume that you've got a thousand US dollars, and we are in the UK here. Okay, the same thing would apply in Trinidad, by the way, except, as I said, the quotes would be different. They would look different. But if you've got a thousand US dollars in a bank in the UK, and you go up to the teller and you say, look, I'd like pounds for this, so literally you are selling your dollars over to the bank. That they would take the money and they would give you pounds, right? And let's assume that for 1,000, maybe you get, or I don't know, say um, 900 pounds. Let's just say, okay. So you give up 1,000 US dollars, and the bank gives you 900 pounds, right? And then, having received it, on your way out, you decide, well, you know what? I think I want back my US dollars. So you go back to the same teller, okay, and you hand him the 900 pounds. Say, look, I just purchased this from you. I gave you 1,000 US dollars, and you gave me 900 pounds. And what I'd like to do now is I'd like to give you back the pounds, and I had a change of mind. Could you give me back my 1,000 US dollars? Well, guess what? You wouldn't get back the same 1,000, same transaction and all that, but you will get back less. Why? Because the bank is a trader, it's a dealer in foreign currency, and they make a profit via the spread. Well, on commissions and all that, but spread is what we are concerned with. Now, the same thing that happens there is the same thing that happens in Trinidad, except, as I keep emphasizing, it's just that the quotation rates are different. So if you're working out a question, okay, and you're in doubt, although you should not be in doubt, you can always take the same transaction and do it from the two point of view, the banks and yours, and realize that you must always be worse off. You see, if you receive in, you'll receive less, and if you pay in, you'll pay more. And that is always the case, because you are not a trader, the bank is. Okay, it's just like if you go into the supermarket, you will pay more for a pound of potatoes than what the supermarket did, because they are, a supermarket. They are the ones buying and selling. So that is important. Now, again, in case you've forgotten your divide and multiply rules, I have them here. Some simple examples, okay, which go through them. As I said, I'll leave that for you to go through, okay. Um, but if you have any problems as you go through it, of course, you can just send me off a question and whatnot. But again, um, these are things that we can't afford to stop and go through everything here. Little examples on it, and then I go on to show you um, forward rates. Now, forward rates are used to hedge transactions, and we will be looking at the way in which a forward hedge is carried out shortly as a revision. But in order to calculate a forward rate, you may need to use a discount or a premium. Now remember, okay, and this is very important because the examiner, anytime he brings forward rates, you will have to use discounts or premiums. Remember, a discount implies that the exchange rate is expected to weaken against the other. So for example, if we've got like this here, okay, this is a spot rate, dollar against pound. Now remember the way in which you read this is 1.584 North dollars for a pound and 1.586 North dollars for a pound. And remember again, in the UK, the bank always sells low and buys high. So this would be for the bank, the selling rate, and this is the buying rate. Okay. And so you've been given the spot rate. And with forward rates, okay, in an exam question, the examiner may give you a 1 month forward rate or a 3 month forward rate. And quite simply, these are the rates, okay, which can be used if a business wishes to use a forward hedge. So for example, if a business wants to protect itself against movements in exchange rate, for example, a British firm, okay, owes a US firm $2 million, which is due in 3 months' time. Now they would use a 3 month forward hedge. If it's 1 month time, they would use a 1 month forward hedge. If the British firm is owed $1 million from the US firm and is due in 1 month, okay, they will use a 1 month forward hedge. But of course, the rate used will be different from if they had to pay. And again, these are things that we will review shortly when we look at the forward and money market hedges. So the question is, where do we get those rates from? Now, as I said, the examiner may give you the forward rates, or more than likely he would not, and you have to calculate it. And there are two ways you can legally calculate a forward rate. Now, when I say legally, I'll explain the meaning of my term. The two ways to calculate a forward rate is using discounts and premiums, or rates of appreciation and depreciation. Now, as I said, a discount implies that the currency is expected to weaken. So if, for example, okay, now remember this is $158 for a pound and $158.60 for a pound. If therefore the dollar is expected to weaken, okay, then guess what? This is what it may look like in 1 month. And if it's expected to weaken, this is what it may look like in 3 months. This is the dollar against sterling, $165.25 for a pound and $165.60 for a pound. What this means is that, and this is very important, this simple rule, okay, if you do not, okay, know of it, this can cause you an unlimited amount of problems when you've got to do calculations, because you may need to use it in different ways. And what I mean is this: an increase in numerical value always means that the value of the currency is going down. An increase in numerical value always means that the value of the currency is going down, and vice versa. A decrease in numerical value means the value of the currency is coming up. So for example, if this is $158.48 for a pound, and this is $162.90 for a pound, and of course $165.25 for a pound, and this is the 3 month forward rate, this is the 1 month, this is spot, which is today. What this means is that the dollar, okay, based on the forward rate quoted, okay, would reflect a weaker dollar in 3 months' time. Now remember, this is the forward rate. This is not the spot rate. The actual spot rate in 3 months' time, okay, nobody knows. We can estimate that, and you are expected to know how to estimate that. We'll come to that shortly. But there's no reason why the actual spot rate in 3 months, okay, so when we actually reach the third month and we examine the spot rate, there's no reason why the actual spot rate would be the same as the 3 month forward rate, which was quoted today, because the 3 month forward rate is a rate quoted today. Now, generally, they may tend to move in the same direction, but even if they do, that does not imply that they will be the same. Because remember, spot rates are determined on a daily basis by different things, as we will examine shortly. So coming back to this, 158.40, let's just use the selling rates, bank selling rates, which would be your buying rates, of course. 158.40 is the spot rate today, and 165.25 is the spot rate in 3 months' time. And since that is 158.40 dollar for a pound and $1.6525 for a pound, what I'm saying is the increase in numerical value of the dollar means that the dollar is actually weakening or expected to weaken. And we can look at that in different ways. For example, at least to get the point across. If you're a British person, as I said, just using the selling rates as an example, so that I'm not mixing up selling and buying, I'm just using the rates, okay, to illustrate. If you're a British person, okay, today you can get $158.40 for a pound. Whereas in 3 months' time, you'll be able to get $165.25 for a pound. So you can obviously get more. So the fact that you can get more for your same pound obviously means that the dollar is expected to weaken. If you look at it, again, ignoring the selling and buying, just the rates to demonstrate this. If you're an American person, it means that today you'll have to pay $158.40. Whereas in 3 months' time, you'll have to pay $165.25 for a pound, that is. So obviously, just to get the point across, an increase in numerical value means the value of the currency itself, the worth then, is going down. And it is important you understand that, because that simple rule, and of course the vice versa, you will have to use in calculations. I can assure you of that, in different ways. Okay, so that's important. Now, what the examiner may do, of course, is this. As I said, he may not give you the forward rates. He just gives you the spot rates. What he does give you, he gives you discounts or premium, but let's say discounts first. Now, if you were to examine these figures, the fact that, as I said, an increase in numerical value means that the currency is weakening. The difference between 162.90 and 158.40 is a discount, because the dollar is the stated currency here. Similarly, the difference between these two will also be a discount. The difference between 165.25 and 158.40 will reflect a discount also. Similarly, 165.60 and 158.60. See, we do not compare the forward rates with the previous forward rate. We compare the forward rates with the spot rate. So what the examiner may do is this. He gives you the spot rates and he tells you that the 1 month forward rate, okay, should reflect a discount of 4.50 to 4.75. And he gives you the spot rate and he says the 3 month forward should reflect a discount of 6.85 to 7. Now, the way I got these figures is, on the one hand, to deduct 158.40 from 162.90, and that's how I got the 4.5 note. And then on the other hand, to deduct the 158.40 from the 165.25, and that's how I got this figure here. Same thing over here. So if therefore it's the difference, and if he gives you the difference and you need to find the forward, clearly all you need to do is to add the discount. And the reason why we add the discount is because I said a discount reflects a weakening currency, and a weakening currency is always represented by an increase in numerical value. So the only way that you can increase the numerical value clearly is if you add. Now this must be a discount, okay? And again, just to show you, just checking back, add the discounts to spot to get the actual forward. We always add discounts. So if I take this and I add this here, I will get 162.90, which of course is this figure. And I also showed you the same thing for the 3 month. Now bear in mind one thing though, note carefully how the discount is reflected. And when you add in this in your calculator, because the examiner has stated in the past that students do make little mistakes here, whether it's accidental or because the student themselves may not know, okay? But when this figure, okay, is entered into your calculator, remember this is 4.5 naught cents, whereas this is $1.5840. So don't enter 4.5 naught into your calculator as 4.5 naught. Yes, okay, because 4.5 naught cents for a dollar is the same as 4.5 naught percent. Remember, it's 100 cents to make a dollar. So this would obviously be reflected as 0.05450 and so forth. So just watch out for that. Okay, that's important. And again, the 3 month forward, same thing. Okay, it's a discount. Add the discount to the spot to get the forward. So he may give you discounts. What about if the currency is expected to strengthen? For example, what about if I had started, okay, if I had taken this figure here, let me just move this across here, okay, alright, so it started here, and this figure here on the other hand, okay, was down here. Well, so now we starting off with 165.25, and the 3 month forward is expected to be 158.40. Or the difference can be found in the same way. But, okay, this means that the dollar is expected to strengthen. Because remember what I said, an increase in numerical value reflects a weakening currency. And therefore, a decrease in numerical value would reflect a strengthened currency. And remember, this is the dollar. Okay, dollar for sterling, dollar for sterling. So you need to watch out for that. Now, if the examiner, okay, gives you a spot rate and he says, okay, the currency is expected to trade at a premium, it means that then that rather than using these as discounts, you need to use them as premiums. Now, if therefore you add discounts to the spot to get the forward because you want an increase in numerical value, clearly it means you'll have to less the premiums from the spot to get the forward if it's a premium. And this is what I've shown you here. Premiums are opposite to discounts. Premiums being the first currency, which would normally be the stated currency, okay, is appreciating against the second. So the dollar here is expected to strengthen. And what he says, now watch closely. See, at P4, you really cannot take anything for granted. The examiner can throw everything at you. Okay? I mean, you know, everything, including the kitchen sink. So he may not actually tell you that the fraction is represented as a premium or a discount. He may just give it to you. Like for example here, the examiner is under no obligation to tell you 4.5 naught or 4.75 is a discount. He need not include the term discount. Similarly here, he need not include the word premium. See, I didn't put anything in here. Now you might be saying, but how then are we expected to know? Well, I'll tell you. See, with discounts, the first part of the discount, the one which is applied to the sell-in, is always lower than the other one which is applied to the buy-in. And with premiums, it's the opposite. With the premium, okay, the first part which is applied to the sell-in Now remember, this is selling for the bank, buying for the bank. We always talk from the bank's view. Your view would be opposite, as I keep telling you. Okay. Um, this would always be higher, which means that with the premium, the first part of the figure, the part that applies to the sell, will be higher than the second part. You see? So that's how you will know. That's why the examiner need not tell you. He might give you the figures, does not say. Give you the figures here, says nothing. And you have to figure it out. And I've just shown you how to figure it out. Now, I used a term earlier. I said that there are two legal ways that you can estimate a forward rate. Okay. And one is using discounts and premiums, which is what I've been showing you. And the other way is using rates of appreciation and depreciation. Now, the rate that you get will be the same thing, It's just that according to how the information is given, you will do it differently. So what he may say in this case, for example, is this. If you were to go back to this, and we know that the dollar is expected to depreciate, lose its value. Note what I just said. We know the dollar is expected to depreciate, lose its value. A depreciation in the stated currency means the value is expected to go down, not the numerical value, or the value of the currency itself. Okay. So what he may say, for example, is this. Now I haven't worked out this. I'm just going to use a rough percentage. He may say that comparing, say, the spot rate with the 3-month forward, that the dollar is expected to depreciate by about 6% or 7%. Now that can be worked out. That's not a problem. Now note that he says the dollar is expected to depreciate by, say, 7%. Okay. And we need to use that to estimate the forward rate. Now, again, an increase in numerical value would always reflect a weakening currency and vice versa. So if he tells you the dollar is expected to depreciate by about 7%, clearly you know that means the dollar is expected to weaken. And clearly you know, therefore, that whatever you do with that 7% and how you apply it to the spot rate must give you a higher numerical figure. And all you've got to do in that case is to take the 158.40 and multiply it by 1.07. It's as simple as that. 1 plus, okay, the rate of depreciation. Similarly, if he tells you the dollar is expected to strengthen by about 7%, you know that a strengthened currency, okay, where the value itself is strengthened, would be represented by a decrease in numerical value. And the only way you're going to get 158.40 to decrease using that 7% is if you multiply it by something less than 1. And in that case, you multiply it by 1 minus 0.07, 0.93, bringing it down in the other direction. Now, both discounts and premiums and rates of appreciation and depreciation will give you the same answer. Well, allowing for a slight decimal or part of a decimal point because around it. But, for all intents and purposes, they will give you the same answer. But you would not be expected to work both. The one that you would use, the approach would be based on the information. I can convert, for example, if I know it's 7%, I can work that in cents. Similarly, if I know it's 6 cents, I can work that as a discount, a percentage. Much the same thing as if your salary, for example, is $7,000 a month, and you've been told, well, in a year's time you're going to get a 5% increase. All you've got to do is to take 7,000 multiplied by 1.05. Similarly, you could have been told that in 1 year's time, your salary will go by $350. See, it's just given different. If it's given as $350, you'll add it on. If it's given as a percentage, you multiply by 1.07 or whatever the percentage is. And it's the same thing here. And this is what the examiner expects. Okay, you need to know how to use the tools. this handout I often refer to as a tools handout, because it has all the basic tools that you need to use. Think of it as a metaphorical toolbox. And it's so important, okay, that you know these things, because not knowing these basic things in this handout, okay, I mean, look, hedging with futures and options and thing itself is not the easiest thing to learn and do. But your work would only be compounded and indeed sometimes made impossible if at least you don't know how to use the basic tools, because all these things are what you will have to use when you are actually using, the hedging techniques, even forward hedges and money market hedges, as we will quickly run through shortly. So this is what I've shown you next: how to use rates of appreciation and depreciation. Saying premiums and discounts can also be measured as rates of appreciation and depreciation respectively on the spot. And the good thing about this little example is this: I've shown you how to work from a discount, say, to a percentage, and vice versa. So it can be done, as I said just now. But of course, in the exam, you will either have to work with rates of appreciation, depreciation, okay, or premiums and discounts. But just to show you, when you look at this, you realize that you can actually move from one to the other. And notice, therefore, forward rate, this is if the currency is expected to weaken, is the spot rate times 1 plus the rate of depreciation. Remember, just now I used 7% and I said 1.07. And if it's the other way around, it will be spot rate into 1 minus the rate of depreciation. So the two legal ways, so to speak, okay, using discounts and premiums and using rates of appreciation and depreciation. Now, the examiner may actually expect you to use the rates in a slightly different way, using something called the interest rate parity theory. And that is also highly examinable, and we'll talk about that shortly. Okay, just recap that shortly, because as I said, these things, I thought it fit to run through because of the importance as we look at the actual hedging techniques. Now, the other thing is this: on this handout, as I said, this tools handout, the examiner may ask you, okay, so what are the determinants of foreign exchange rates? Like, what determines foreign exchange rates? Now, when the examiner asks that, or if he asks you that, what determines foreign exchange rates? That's a three-part question. I'll tell you why. The first part of that question is what determines daily spot rates. Daily spot rates. Like if, for example, you're looking at the movement between the dollar and sterling, and you realize, for example, let me just show you something. Okay. December. Okay. 1. And all right, I guess I could. Oh, well, I didn't go the way it was supposed to. Hang on. Should be better now. Oh, no, I don't want months. I'm afraid I want days. Okay. All right. December 1, December. Okay, let's say 5. I didn't want all the days anyway. Okay, December 8, and say December 15th. And let's do 2 more. 1, 2. Cool. Now let me just borrow a little thing here. Right. And what we observed over the period from December the 1st to December the 15th, the dollar against sterling, the spot rates. Okay, so this is actual history now. Okay, so, we probably about anytime after December the 15th, and we looked at the movements over the 15 days. The starting spot rate was say 1.5640, and then it went to 1.64. That has a bit too much. Say 5700, and then 1.5825, and even these what might appear to be small figures, okay, over a period like this is quite a large movement, okay, but it's just a point I want to demonstrate here. Let's say 1.6000, right? Let me just fix this. And I'm fixing this for a reason. I'll explain something to you. Cool. Okay. Now, before we look at the meaning of these rates and with respect to the question here being asked, just one thing I'd like to tell you. Students often have problems in the exam in knowing how to state their rate calculations. In other words, having worked out a rate then. For example, do we keep it to 3 decimal places, 4, 2, none? And as I always tell them now if you were to look at the financial pages of a newspaper like the Financial Times, and you're looking at these exchange rates, the spot rates today, between different currencies, all sorts of cross currencies and whatnot, the rates will be quoted in a certain way. Now, the examiner does not expect you to know how all rates are quoted, because there are so many exchange rates all over the place. So when you have to quote your rate, if you have to work out something, just follow the format, the decimal format used in the exam. So if the examiner gives you the rate to 4 decimal places, as I've done here, keep it to 4 decimal places. Do not shorten it or lengthen it. And that's very, very important. Follow the same procedure and the same principle. Now, which of course makes it easy for you, so you don't have to guess. Now, coming back to our question here, what determines foreign exchange rates? And the question being asked at the first part of the question is what actually determines daily spot rates, right? See what causes foreign exchange rates to move, and we're talking about daily spot rates. Now, generally, with a floating rate currency, a floating exchange rate, and of course that is what we've been looking at here all the while, um, um, the daily movements would be as a result of demand and supply. That's why those of you all who did economics, okay, you would have been taught that one advantage with a floating rate system is that the rate would find its own equilibrium. For example, what these rates show you, the fact that the dollar, okay, has been weakening against sterling. What that could indicate is that sterling therefore has been strengthening against the dollar. I mean, obviously the other way would work as well. It means that perhaps American people, okay, maybe because of Christmas or whatnot, okay, have been buying a lot of British goods, and the British currency would be strengthened, and therefore the US currency, this is dollar against sterling, would therefore be weakened. Okay, so that can be a reason. If it was the other way around, okay, it started at 1.6, it goes to 1.56, then what I might say, for example, is that maybe what's been happening is that British people have been buying a lot of American goods, and therefore the dollar has been strengthened against sterling. So what we are saying is generally, in a free floating foreign exchange market, the spot rates would normally be the indicative, okay, of demand and supply forces, the interaction of demand and supply. Now, again, whilst we're on that issue, just as a recap, remember there are two types of foreign exchange rate systems. Now, I'm not talking about direct and indirect quotation systems. We've got floating rate systems, okay, and fixed rate systems. Now, with a fixed rate system, okay, the exchange rate between two currencies would not move despite changes in supply and demand forces. For example, in Barbados, the Bajan currency exchange rate against the US dollar is fixed. At some time in our past, years ago, okay, we had a fixed rate against the US dollar also. But generally, so that's a fix. Then we've got floating. Now, most of the currencies, though, may float. And a floating rate means obviously that the exchange rate does not remain the same. It's supposed to be a better, okay, supposedly a better rate, a better system, because the rate finds its own equilibrium based on demand and supply forces. So if you are demanding the commodity of a foreign country, you'll be demanding the currency of the foreign country to pay for it, and the currency of the foreign country therefore will appreciate against yours because you are increasing the demand. If of course it appreciates too high, then of course it means that the foreign goods become too expensive. People would not be able to buy them as much, and of course the rate should go down back. That's why we say, it strengthens too high, it weakens back, and that's why we say in economics it should find its own equilibrium. The problem is, okay, there are two types of floating rate systems. One, a free floating rate system, where literally the rate is allowed to move up and down and find its own equilibrium on its own then. And then there's a dirty float system or a managed float system where the central banks of the country would often intervene in order to sort out the rate because they think it's either strengthening or weakening too much. Okay, and these are things, of course, you should know. Now, in our example here, coming back to this, the fact that as I said, the dollar is depreciating over the period. Remember, it's an increase in numerical value means a depreciating or a currency which is losing its value. Okay, could be because of supply and demand. Now, still sticking with this first question, what determines daily foreign exchange rates? We said supply and demand. But we should not think that the only reason why currencies are demanded is to buy goods. Now, that is called the transaction motive. Like if a country, okay, demands the currency of another country because there's a lot of buying of goods going on, that's, transaction motive. But there are other reasons why currencies are demanded also. Now, although when you look at your basic economics, you will see that money is demanded for three reasons: the transaction, precautionary, and speculative motive. Okay, here we leave out the precautionary motive, which is demanding an item, money just to have some extra in store for safety. Then, okay, so we talk about the transaction motive, and then we talk about the speculative motive, which is where currencies are demanded, or at least transaction denominated in a certain currency, okay, are demanded because people simply want to make money out of them, speculate, not necessarily actually buying goods and services, but just speculating. And that's another reason, okay, which can influence the exchange rate: speculation. Now, some countries, okay, they have actually outlawed the use of speculative activities because the rationale there, okay, meaning why they did it, is because they think that it would adversely, okay, or at least it can interrupt the normal movement of the exchange rate, these speculative activities. And since speculative activities tend to benefit individuals and businesses more rather than the general, country, then certain governments tend to be a bit, iffy about it. And then the third reason, okay, is to satisfy debt obligations. And these are things you need to know. So if, for example, a US firm borrowed, okay, or raised a 5-year loan in sterling, okay, maybe 100 million sterling, the US firm is going to have to pay back, pay interest in sterling. And that means every year or month or however frequently they need to pay, there'll be a demand for sterling. Much the same as how sterling will be demanded if you are buying from the UK. And of course, eventually, when they need to pay back the principal, they would also need to demand sterling. So debt obligations would often contribute to exchange rates as well. Now, this is what I've told you here. Why are currencies? So supply and demand, this is what determines daily foreign exchange rates. Okay. Speculation, international trade, this is the transaction motive, and debt obligations. Okay. Simple. Now, by the way, just as a note of interest, today I put up on the Zircon Tuition Facebook page, I put up an article on futures and the futures market. So you may wish to take a read of it as soon as you could. It's not that it's going to interrupt what we do here, okay, but it's a useful article, and you might want to take a look at it when you get around to doing it. Okay, so this is one main reason. Now, so let's just back up a bit. The examiner says, what determines foreign exchange rates? Broad question. He does not say what determines daily spot rates. The question, what determines daily spot rates, is a subset of the bigger question, what determines foreign exchange rates, because daily spot rates is just one part of the previously referred to three-part question. So having looked at what determines daily spot rates, we said transaction motive, international trade, international trade is transaction, speculation and debt and so forth. The next main question, the second part of our three-part question then is what determines, let me look at the third one before, right? What determines future spot rates? What determines future spot rates? So if this, and this is something again, I cannot overemphasize how important this is. So you've got a spot rate today between the dollar and sterling, okay? And we would like to estimate a spot rate in a year's time. Now, we may need to do this for different reasons. For example, we have investments, we undertaken a project, an investment project, and we need to have an estimate to work with. Now, I'll tell you something. With a floating rate currency and with a floating exchange rate, then it is simply not possible to accurately predict the 1 year spot rate. I mean, that would be like, asking you, for example, what would our TT rate against the dollar be in a year's time? Or what would the sterling against the US dollar be in a year's time? Something like that. Now, you may have an idea, you may be able to use some formula to provide you with an estimate, which is what you have to do here anyway. But you need to understand that it's merely an estimate, and there's no reason why in a year's time the actual spot rate will be the same as the predicted spot rate. As I said, though, it's like that, isn't it? With different things. I mean, when you're carrying out an investment appraisal project, in order to calculate the NPV before the project has started, you would estimate cash flows for year 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it's 10 years up to year 10, wouldn't you? Nobody's saying that the actual cash flows would be the same as that. We try to do it to the best of our ability, take into account risk factors and all these things. But the actual figures may be different. That does not stop us. In the same way here, we need to make estimates. Now, the examiner expects you, as I said, to know how to use something called purchasing power parity theory in order to estimate future spot rates. He gives you this formula in the exam. Where is it? hang on a bit. Yeah, he gives you this formula in the exam. This thing here. Because he does not tell you what the terms mean. But you need to use the formula. Now, the formula itself, unless you know how to use the formula, it really wouldn't help you at all. It's like if if somebody gives you some fancy tool, okay, for Christmas, you don't have a clue how to use the tool, you're none the wiser then. Okay, so it's the same thing here. Now, the formula in itself really isn't a helpful formula at all, because if you were to take a look at it, okay, well, we can understand the S1 and the S0. S1, that's how we say year 1 and year 0. S1 means the spot rate expected in a year's time, and S0 means the current spot rate. Because, and what we are trying to do is to estimate the spot rate in a year's time. So we can understand this. But then, we come to this part. Times 1 plus HC over 1 plus HB. And we've been told, as you will be, okay, as you will see if you were to look at your text, HC and HB are inflation rates in country C and country B respectively to time T. Now, what is that? That does not say anything. So guess what? The tool that you give for Christmas, even if you read the directions, and the directions are in you understand English and the directions are in German, guess what? You're none the wiser. And it's the same thing here. Unless you know what these things mean and how to use them, this formula isn't very helpful at all. Right. So guess what? There's a very easy way to use this formula which would always ensure that you never well, all right, Sean. um, there's another way to use this which would always ensure that you do the correct thing. And it has to do with this appreciation and depreciation thing we spoke about earlier. Okay, now let's take a look. I always tell students this is what it comes down to. See, if you learn this, that's all you need to learn. You don't even need to remember HCHB or anything. But before we look at that, there's something else that you need to remember, which I emphasized earlier in this handout, the importance of it, that is. And I told you that an increase in numerical value means the value of the currency is going down, and a decrease in numerical value means the value is going up. Remember, we said that, right? And that's key to using this formula. Now, this purchasing power parity theory is also called the law of one price. Now, the examiner isn't going to ask you in detail to talk about it, because it's a very detailed law. And going into it, it's a very mathematical thing as well. So what you need to know though is how to use it in order to estimate, okay, future spot rates. Now, you're told here that PPPT states that the currency of the country with the higher expected inflation rate would depreciate, meaning would weaken then, against the currency of the country with the lower expected inflation rate by approximately the difference between the inflation rates, and vice versa. Meaning then that the currency of the country with the lower, okay, expected rate will strengthen then or appreciate. Okay, that's what I mean by the vice versa. It is used to predict future spot rates. What we are saying therefore in plain simple English is this: if you're looking at the US and the UK, and we want to estimate the exchange rate in 1 year's time, the spot rate in a year's time, and the inflation rate over the next year in the UK is expected to be 6%, and in the US is expected to be 3%. So note I said, just to recap, we're trying to estimate the spot rate in a year's time, and we're saying that the estimated inflation rate, okay, in the UK will be 6% and in the US will be 3%. So the US inflation rate will be lower, is expected to be lower. Since the US, okay, their inflation rate is expected to be lower. Based on what you just read here, it means that the dollar will strengthen against sterling. In other words, the sterling will weaken against the dollar by approximately 3%, which is the inflation rate differential. Now, the reason why we say approximately is this. It will weaken or strengthen by approximately 3%. But, and we can work that out because, of course, if you know the current spot rate, you can find out 3% and just adjust accordingly. But in order to get a fairer estimate, and note I didn't say a correct estimate, a fairer estimate, which is based on PPPT, we will use the PPPT formula. But as I said, okay, you really don't need to remember such HE and HB and so forth. Let me tell you why. Let's take a look at this example here. The current spot rate shows exchange rate at 165.70 to 169.40. That's dollar for a pound. Okay, of course, this is sell, this is buy. Remember, indirect system and all that, right? Estimated inflation rates over the next year: USA 5, UK 3. Now, the question wants you to estimate the 1 year spot. And before going any further and attempting to use any formula, we know that because the inflation rate in the US over the next year will be higher than the UK, we know that the dollar will depreciate against sterling because of what you just read here. Higher inflation rate, the currency, if it's the dollar we are looking at, it will weaken against sterling. And that's it. Now, the next thing is this. Remember again what a weakening currency means. A weakening currency means the numerical value is going to go up. So if you know the form of the PPPT formula is to take the current spot rate and multiply it by a fraction. That's all I'm telling you. You know the form of PPPT is to take the current spot rate and multiply it by a fraction. And of course, a fraction means one figure over another. Right. That's all you need to remember. You know that if you multiply something by an improper fraction, in other words, where the numerator is higher than the denominator, you know the end result will be a higher figure than what you started off with. And vice versa. You know if you multiply this 165.70, where the numerator is lower than the denominator, you know you will end up with a smaller numerical value. Makes sense, right? Well, there you have it. Having determined that the dollar must weaken because of this, we know that. You're saying to yourself then, okay, let's say I'm using the selling rate, I can do the same thing for the buying. It means therefore that the numerical value of this must go up. It is expected to weaken, isn't it? And I know I'm using, okay, a fraction. One weight would be on top, one weight will be underneath, but no, not just the weight itself. The 5% is always 1 plus 1 plus, okay, but it is a fraction. So obviously you'll put 5 on top, because if you put 3 on top, this figure is going to go down numerically, and if this goes down numerically, that means the dollar is expected to strengthen, which is not what PPPT says. So it's as simple as that. It's always 1 plus 1 plus. So you figure is the 5 have to go on top is 1.05. You figure is the 3 underneath 1.03. If it was the other way around, okay, that using the dollar, because this is the dollar, and if it was 3 and this was 5, then 3 will be on top. Because in that case, the UK is expected to have the higher inflation rate, and therefore the dollar would strengthen. And a strengthened dollar means a decrease in numerical value, you understand? So, and that's it. That's all you need to remember. Okay? You don't even need to look at the formula in the formula sheet. You just know that it's a spot rate I'm starting off with today, and I'm multiplying this by a 1 plus something, 1 plus something, and of course the plus must follow what I've just been explaining. Now, we can use another example. The yen against the dollar. Current spot rate is 125.16 yen for a dollar. Estimated inflation rates over the next year. Japan 3, USA 5. Now right away, and we have to estimate the spot rate in a year's time. Right away, we know that the Japanese, currency, the yen, will strengthen against the currency of the US, the dollar, because Japan's estimated inflation rate over the next year is lower than the USA. We know that, and therefore we say to ourselves, well, if this is expected to strengthen, that means the numerical value must go down. And therefore, in this case, I'll put 1.03 on top 1.05 times, and I'll get this figure, 122.78. And that's all that it is. Now, before we go on, let's see if I have anything here. I thought I had something here. Okay, one other thing that you need to know is this. Um, the examiner may not necessarily ask you to work out the spot rate in a year's time. The examiner may ask you to work out the spot rate in 6 months' time. All right, 6 months' time. So what that means is this. Let's assume that you're given the same information, just as what I did here, top. And the question says, and you need to understand that when you've been asked to work these things out in the exam, it's not an end in itself, it's a means to an end. Because you may be doing a foreign currency, international capital investment calculation, and some of the monies would be received in 6 months' time, or some payment has to be made in 6 months' time, and you need a 6-month wait. And you've been given the same sort of information as what I gave you here. And now, same thing, except the requirement says estimate the spot rate in 6 months' time. Well, your reason and everything is all the same, except what you'll do here is this. You'll take the 0.05 and split it in 2. Because remember, you want it in 6 months' time. So you'll say 0.05 divided by 2. Right? And then you'll add it to the 1. And 0.03 divided by 2. And then you'll add it to the 1. See, the 1 is standard. You can't change that. It's 1 plus 1 plus. So you divide this by 2. So 2.5% then. Okay, 1.025. You divide this, 1.0150. Okay, and that's it. That's all you need to do. If you need to work out the spot rate in 3 months' time, again, you adjust according to the number of months. If you need to work it out in 1 month's time, same thing. Okay. So just bear that in mind. If you have a 6-month rate and he gives you the figures, like this, inflation rate estimates over the next year, make sure and adjust your rates, then 1 plus and do your thing. Now, the last thing here is this. So what we've looked at, coming back to our 3-part question, remember the original question was what determines foreign exchange rates? And the first part was what determines daily spot rates? The second part, I worked out this first for a reason rather than number 2, but I mean, it doesn't matter. We still need to work it. The second part was what determines future spot rates. And I said that you use PPPT. I showed you that. And the third part is what determines forward rates. Now, remember I told you a while back when we were looking at forward rates and rates of appreciation and depreciation, I told you that we'd see that. Okay, again, we'd come across that again. Okay, using the same rates and whatnot, but in a more organized way, if I might use that term. What I mean is this. If you've got to work out a forward rate, you can do that using discounts and premiums, or you can do that using rates of depreciation and appreciation, okay, or appreciation, or you can do that using something called IRPT. Now, IRPT is also based on rates, and it's similar to the rates of appreciation and depreciation thing, except it's a sort of formalized, standardized way of doing this thing. Now, the good thing about IRPT, which stands for interest rate parity theory, is that it works exactly, okay, as PPPT does, except rather than using inflation rates, we use interest rates. Now, the interest rate is normally higher than the inflation rate because the interest rate is expected to take into account the inflation rate. In other words, the inflation rate is assumed to be one part of the overall interest rate, right? But as you will see, and it's very easy the way in which I've put it here, all you need to do is to use exactly everything that we were using so far, except number one, you're working out a forward rate, and number two, you're using interest rates rather than just the inflationary element of it. Now let's take a look, and I'll tell you something. As with PPPT, IRPT itself is a very complex, okay, theory. Now you don't need to worry. The examiner is not going to ask you to go into any detail about the deriving IRPT and the all sorts of um, uh, implications of it, and where the information comes from in detail and whatnot. Okay, it's quite interesting though. I mean, I would have gone into a little discussion of it with you, but it will just take up extra time that we really can't afford to waste right now. Okay, so watch this. The third part of my question, therefore, which I have as number 2. What determines forward rates? The interest rate parity theorem, IRPT, states that international financial markets are efficient. There are no bargain rates of interest to be held, and so on and so forth. All right, that's all fine. But take a look at this, just as how I had it in bold, and then we go back to the formula, which is also given to you. IRPT states that the currency of the country. Now compare this with what we just read. Right, we can always almost see both of them at the same time. IRPT states that the currency of the country with the higher expected interest rate, interest this time, not inflation, right? Okay, would depreciate against the currency of the country with the lower expected interest rate by approximately the difference between the interest rates and vice versa. So you see that? They're so similar, as I always tell students, that when I had to type whether this one first or this one first, I just copy and pasted the other and just change the words. That's it, because they're exactly the same. Now, let's, although you really don't need to get into a detailed understanding of it though, it might be useful before we see how it works, and it works just like this, to just look at this. See, this PPPT may be easy to digest or follow, because you might think to yourself, well, I can understand why, if a country is expected to have a higher inflation rate, its currency will depreciate, because it means that the inflation rate is higher and so forth. And of course, costs would keep going up and all these things, and it might not be a good place to invest in and all sorts of things, right? In other words, we always tend to associate a higher inflation rate with as being not a good thing, right? But this one here though, how do we explain the fact? Now, when we look at interest rates, by the way, as a basis, we tend to use rates which would be closer to one another in different countries. So, for example, let's say we were looking at the UK and the US. You would not look at mortgage rates in the USA and the UK, or you would not look at bank lending to commercial customers in the UK and the USA, because those things are not so standard. Remember, according to your risk profile and the security and all that, the interest rate can be different. So what we use as a standardized representation between the two countries is the maybe the yields on government debt, say over the next year, because those are um, the say 12-month or 1 year treasuries, for example, yields in the USA and in the UK are more closely aligned with one another than bank borrowing lending rates and all these things. So we may use those. Now, so and, and by the way, remember those rates will influence the other rates as well. Okay. But anyway, let's see. The question is, so IRPT says the currency of the country with the higher expected interest rate would depreciate. Now, the you might say, but if the interest rate is higher, let's say for example, okay, I am a US investor, okay, and I realize that in the coming year the interest rate which would apply to me, since I want to invest, because remember, as I said, although we may use government yields as a basis, these would normally be used as a guideline for the other rates as well. So you might say, well, I want to invest in the UK. The UK is expected to give me a higher interest rate. So why would the forward rate between sterling and the dollar reflect the fact then that sterling would actually depreciate? In the form of the forward rate. Remember, we're talking about forward rates here, not spot. That is what we're saying. Because you might be saying, well, if I have to invest in the UK, it means I have to buy pounds. And if I buy pounds, following normal demand and supply rule, the value of the pound will go up. The people will rush the pound in order to invest in UK, the value should go up. And you know what? You're right. But you also need to remember that if the value of a currency is expected to go up or goes up too much, it will become difficult for people to trade with that country because the value of the currency has risen. In other words, there are two sides to it. You see, not just one side. If you look at the investment part, you might say so, but you have to think all around. You see, not just on one, thinking in one plane or one dimension then. And empirical evidence has shown that the higher expected interest rates would generally mean that the forward rates would reflect a depreciation in the currency of the country. And that's why I said this is the same thing as for PPPT. The very same thing. The only thing is, if you've got to do a calculation, you use interest rates instead of inflation rates. Now, let me see if I have, well, I don't have an example here, but just to show you, if I was to use this same thing, and all right, just take it up here. And I'd give it a different color, right? Now, where did it go? All right, okay, good. So this is the current spot, and rather than this being inflation, I'll change this to interest. Okay, good. But this is still the current spot. See, we start off, if you look at the formula, watch this. F is the forward rate, say in a year. S0 is same spot rate as the one down here, right? And these are interest rates. Estimate the 1 year forward rate. Now we will do the same thing as what was done down here, you see. Same thing. So if, for example, okay, I borrow this. Same thing. This, of course, is interest rate. This is interest rate, and what we guess will be the forward rate. So Now, again, this is something which is actually taught at F9 also, because F9 students expected to know about IRPC and PPPT. But, okay, the difference is you will be expected to use it in many different ways as compared to them, an F9 student, okay? Because remember, your paper has a totally different focus. So all you need to do, as I said, just remember, okay, IRPT, PPPT, IRPT generally to estimate forward rates, PPPT spot rates. It works like this. Once you remember this thing and these words in bold, okay, then and the formula is always in the form of the spot rate multiplied by 1 plus something over 1 plus something, and that a depreciating currency means the numerical value will go up and an appreciating currency means the numerical value will come down. You shouldn't have any problem. That's why I said this thing about the numerical value and so forth is so important, okay, because if you don't know that, you will make simple mistakes which can cost you dearly in the exam. So this handout, okay, as I said, which I call a tools handout or nuts and bolts handout, okay, is very important. It covers all the little things that you know may want to review and touch upon, okay. And having looked at this, okay, now as I said, I did put this up in the classroom. um I mean, apart from the little things we were just doing, of course, but that has the example and all that, just as what we had before. Okay, now we've got that out of the way. And as I said, if you go through it and you have any issues, just let me know. The reason why we had to go through that, of course, as I said, it's a toolbox. We need to know how to hedge. In other words, a firm, okay, let's say a British firm, which deals with a US firm, normal trade, okay, may buy goods on credit. The credit period might be a month. Or a German firm, okay, may purchase goods from a British firm, okay, on credit. The credit period may be 2 months. Now, in both those situations, okay, um, one of the firms would need to protect itself against the risk of adverse foreign exchange movements. Because in both those examples, the exchange rates between the country, the currency, sorry, of the country, the currencies differ. On the one hand, we looked at dollar against sterling. On the other hand, we looked at the euro against sterling. Right. Now let's compare that with this third example. A UK firm buys goods from a US firm and the amount is due immediately. In other words, no credit is given. Now, if the amount is due immediately, then no hedging is necessary. The reason being because there is no uncertainty involved in the movement of the exchange rates. You see, time increases uncertainty. If the amount has to be paid for immediately, it means the British firm literally has to pay for it on the spot. And it means the British firm will call up his bank and say, listen, I would like a draft or however they choose to pay, for so much in dollars. And of course, the rate being used would be the existing rate. So for hedging, okay, to take place, it assumes that there's a time delay involved in the period. It assumes that, of course, the two currencies are different. I mean, if a German firm is buying from an Italian firm, there is no hedging there. Remember, they both use the euro. Okay. Now, I said just now, though, that one firm in the transaction would have foreign exchange risk. In a foreign exchange transaction, the both firms cannot have foreign exchange risk exposure simultaneously. In the first example, where the UK firm bought goods from the US firm, and let's say the amount is due in 2 months. Now, let's say that's all I've told you. The UK firm has bought goods from a US firm, and the amount is due in 2 months. And the question, okay, has been put to you. So, which firm needs to hedge? Now, we know that one firm must hedge because there's a time delay. But I haven't given you the value of the currency, the value of the transaction. The firm, okay, that needs to hedge would be the one which has foreign exchange risk exposure. Now, in my example, therefore, if I say that the UK firm buys goods from the US firm worth $2 million due in 2 months' time, clearly in that case, the UK firm has to hedge because they owe dollars and they don't know what the exchange rate will be in 2 months' time. So they will hedge from the viewpoint of an importer because they bought goods and they owe a bill. If on the other hand, I had told you, same thing, the UK firm buys goods from a US firm and the value of the transaction is 1.5 million pounds. In other words, it just so happens that the UK firm was invoiced in its own currency. Then guess what? It's the US firm which would have the currency risk. Because in 2 months' time, all that the UK firm needs to do is to pay a draft for £1.5 million. They were invoiced in pounds, and remember, it's their own currency. The US firm, however, does not know, okay, the amount of dollars which will be realized from this in 2 months' time, and they would hedge in that case. So in a transaction, only one firm at a time would need to hedge, and of course, the time, there must be a time delay. If it's always cash, then there's none. It's like what you do sometimes, I guess, in that when the nowadays, I think you all can relate to this. Nowadays, to pay exam fees, or to pay subscriptions, but let's say exam fees, and maybe for a student doing 2 exams, sign up for 2 exams, the student may have to just now take a little loan to pay for it because the fees are so high. So what a student may do, even I do it when I have to pay my membership fees, because membership fees right now, last time wrong, was £225, okay, for nothing. Get nothing out of it, just to keep FCCA behind your name. But anyway, so what I would normally do, and I guess you do the same thing, is I would look at the rate, hoping that the rate over a period of time, well, in our case, that the rate will come down. So maybe it starts off at 9 and I'm hoping that it will drop to 8 or something like that. You and I, we have to pay in sterling. So obviously we will be concerned about the movements in sterling. The ACCA need not bother because they know come what may, £100 is £100. So you get the point. Right. Now, having said that, the question is, what are the different techniques which can be used to hedge? And as I said, some of these things you would have studied at F9, which we'll go through quickly just as a recap. And of course, I'll give you the worksheet and all that, so you can, in fact, in one of the handouts, okay, this handout, I've shown you the full procedure for a money market hedge and a forward hedge and all that. So it's like and then there's another handout as well, which you take a look, this yellow one, which I think I only put this one up today. I was supposed to put it up last night, but I forgot to put it up. Um, so we take a look at this too. But before we actually look at the different hedges, what do we mean by foreign exchange risk? Now, there are different types of foreign exchange risk. The three main types of foreign exchange risk include transaction risk, translation risk, and economic risk. When we hedge using things like a money market hedge, a forward hedge, a futures hedge, an options hedge, and so forth, we are hedging from the viewpoint of a merchant, an importer and exporter, and we are hedging, okay, against transaction risk. That's important. Now, let's take a look at something I have. I have it here, but there's another handout. Yeah, this here. Foreign currency risk exposure. Types of exposure, transaction. Again, that's what we are concerned with. A firm has transaction exposure whenever it has contractual cash flows, receivables, and payables whose values are subject to unanticipated changes in exchange rates due to a contract being denominated in a foreign currency. Now, the fact that they've said on the article says unanticipated changes, it means, of course, it implies a future period. To realize the domestic value of its foreign denominated cash flows, the firm must exchange foreign currency for domestic currency. As firms negotiate contracts with set prices and delivery dates in the face of a volatile foreign exchange market, with exchange rates constantly fluctuating, the firms face a risk of changes in the exchange rate between the foreign and domestic currency. It refers to the risk associated with the change in the exchange rate between the time an enterprise initiates a transaction and settles it. And again, this emphasizes that there must be a time period involved for there to be, risk. Economic risk, and by the way, you're expected to know the meaning of these terms. A firm has economic exposure, also known as forecast risk, to the degree that its market value is influenced by unexpected exchange rate fluctuations. Such exchange rate adjustments can severely affect the firm's market share position with regards to its competitors, the firm's future cash flows, and ultimately the firm's value. Economic exposure can affect the present value of future cash flows. Any transaction that exposes the firm to foreign exchange risk also exposes the firms economically. But economic exposure can be caused by other business activities and investment which may not be mere international transactions, such as future cash flows from fixed assets. A shift in exchange rate that influences the demand for a good in some country would also be an economic exposure for a firm that sells that good. Economic exposures cannot be hedged as well due to the limited data, and is costly and time consuming. Economic exposures can be managed by product differentiation, pricing, branding, outsourcing. Now, you see, a simple thing, for example, if a firm trades with another firm, okay, in another country, and in addition to this firm, there are other firms trading as well, and the country, okay, one of the countries, the one that we are using, okay, they start to experience increases in their costs at home, which means it makes their product, okay, economically less attractive. Then that would be an example of economic exposure. You see, the problem is it would affect your business, but we can't hedge against it. You see, forward rates and these different hedging techniques are used to hedge against transaction risk. What you told is because of the limited data and the volatile data, if at all any, it's very, very difficult. And in fact, we can't hedge against economic exposure. We might be able to do it by protecting ourselves in different ways. For example, we may have different type of products. We ourselves as a firm may trade in different countries, not just one country. So we may be able to balance off the effect of any changes. In addition to selling, we may also be buying, so at least we might do it like that. But the important thing is that you can't hedge against economic exposure. You hedge against transaction exposure. Now, the third one is one that you will encounter in your accounts. A firm translation exposure is the extent to which its financial reporting is affected by exchange rate movements. As all firms generally must prepare consolidated financial statements. Well, when we say must, it means if they have to, meaning if they've got subsidiaries and whatnot. For reporting purposes, the consolidation process for multinational entails translating foreign assets and liabilities on the financial statements of foreign subsidiaries from foreign to domestic. While translation exposure may not affect a firm's cash flows, it could have a significant impact on a firm's reported earnings and therefore its price. It is important that you realize that, because remember, at the end of the day, okay, what a firm shows as profit is one variable that affects the stock price, and what a firm shows as earnings. Translation exposure is distinguished from transaction risk as a result of income and losses from various types of risk having different accounting treatments. So you don't hedge against translation risk, you don't hedge against economic risk, you hedge against transaction risk. Now these are the three main, but there are two others you may come across. Contingent, in fact one other, contingent exposure. Okay, just for general interest, a firm has contingent exposure, okay, when bidding for foreign projects or negotiating other contracts or foreign direct investments. Such an exposure arises from the potential for a firm to suddenly face a transactional or economic foreign exchange risk contingent on the outcome of some contract or negotiation. For example, a firm could be waiting for a project bid to be accepted by a foreign business or government that, if accepted, would result in an immediate receivable. While waiting, the firm faces a contingent exposure from the uncertainty as to whether or not that receivable will happen. If the bid is accepted and the receivable is paid, the firm then faces transaction exposure. So a firm may prefer to manage contingent exposure. You see, this is useful because what this shows you is that obviously the effect of the uncertainty could turn out to be good or bad. And this is the point being made here. Okay, so of course, if you have to talk about the different potential risks, there's nothing wrong in talking about it. You don't often see it described. Like, for example, if you look at your text, you normally see it talk about the first three, but this is quite useful because it shows you that there's some relationship between the uncertainty, and contingent implies uncertainty, and of course transaction risk. Right, now, so we've got our chart here. Foreign exchange risk management techniques. These are the ones which, okay, you expected to know about from your F9, but which we'll run through very quickly. Basic hedging techniques or perfect hedging techniques. Money market hedge, forward hedge. Both of them, actually, the way in which the hedge is carried out is dependent on whether the firm is hedging from the viewpoint of an importer or an exporter. But the importer rules and exporter rules, okay, from a procedural point of view, tend to be more significant for a money market hedge. Because I was supposed to put in an arrow here and here. Let's see if I could put it in, rather than applicable to this one, because the different rules, as you probably know, okay, would be, you know, alrighty. So we take him first. Alright, and we put one here, and then we put one here. Okay, right. So procedure wise, as I said, more important that you know the hedge from forward hedge from the viewpoint of one or the other is fairly straightforward, no specific procedure and whatnot required. Now these are called perfect hedging techniques because the importer or the exporter, which is hedging, knows with complete certainty what the outcome is going to be. The money market hedge is a bit more procedural than the forward hedge, but the firm knows with complete certainty what the outcome will be for both of them. And the reason why the firm knows with certainty is because all of the information used to hedge money and forward, all that information will be known up front. So generally what a firm can afford to do is to um, do a calculation if it decides to use the money market. It hasn't done it as yet, but the information is available. And then do a calculation if it decides to use the forward and choose which one is in its favor. Now it can do that because I said all the input data for money and forward, all that is known now, today. See, for example, it does not rely on a 3-month spot rate or anything like that. If there was any uncertainty there, then it would not be a perfect hedge, you see. A perfect hedge means the actual outcome and the expected outcome will be one and the same. Now, it stands to reason, therefore, that if the main reason for hedging is to hedge against transaction risk, that a firm would be inclined to use a perfect hedge. Because after all, the firm is hedging to protect itself against adverse movements because of payments and receipts it has to make or receive. And these arise out of the normal course of business. So firms prefer to stay away from risky situations. And again, it stands to reason, therefore, that we will use a technique which has no risk. But there are other techniques which can be used as well. And these have risk. These have inherent risk, the way in which the techniques are applied and the procedures. Because with all of them, there is some degree of uncertainty. Advanced or imperfect hedging techniques, currency futures, currency options, currency swaps, and there are two types of currency options: over the counter traded options, calls and puts. And then we have because it was a little bit difficult for me to fit it in here, two others, safes, and forex swaps. We look at those as we go on. Now the question is, why would a firm hedging transaction risk even consider using a hedging technique where the outcome is uncertain? After all, the thinking should be, look, we don't wish to create additional risk for ourselves, so we would prefer to use a technique which is riskless. After all, we are already faced with normal risk associated with our transactions, buying, selling, and so forth. So why would we want to use an advanced or imperfect hedging technique? Imperfect hedging technique means that the actual outcome and the predicted outcome would generally be different. Now it may work out to be the same, but that would be purely by coincidence. Generally they will be different. So why will we want to do that? Well, I'll tell you why. Because if you were to use a basic hedging technique, the outcome is known with certainty. It can only be one figure. If you to use an imperfect hedging technique, the outcome is uncertain and it can be different figures. For example, for an exporter who is therefore receiving money in 3 months or 2 months time, if you were to use a money market hedge, let's say it's a UK firm hedging and they are exporters, they will receive dollars from a US firm. So they have exchange rate risk. So they wish to hedge using a money market hedge. They know with complete certainty in 2 months' time when that dollar is converted into sterling, I know today what the sterling outcome is going to be. Let's say the sterling outcome I know will be £500,000. Right. If on the other hand, okay, the firm decides to use a futures hedge, the outcome in 2 months' time or 3 months or whenever it is can be £600,000. It can be £400,000. It can be different. That's the point. So it amounts to gambling then. If the firm chooses to gamble, it means it has the opportunity to make more, to make something on top of what it should be making, but there is also the possibility it may lose out. So what is advisable? Well, the proper thing to do, if all that the firm is doing is hedging against transaction risk, is to stay away from these imperfect hedging techniques, because many firms have paid the price. Okay, in fact, there have been instances where firms have actually gone through, failed, bankrupt, liquidated because of how they decided to hedge. See, they expose themselves so much. Okay, and the sad part about examples like that is that it was not due to normal trading circumstances. It was not due to a fall in demand for their goods or anything. It was simply due to greed, where they attempted to make some extra money or hope to make some extra money because of the hedging technique. But you see, these hedging techniques, they are not inclined to give an investor what the investor wants. Okay, anything can happen. Whether you investor one or investor two or investor three, you treated exactly the same way. Okay, you face the risk. So that is how we would use the techniques from the viewpoint of an importer and exporter. But in reality, investors who hedge with futures, they don't hedge because they're hedging against transaction risk. They use futures and options and the like merely to speculate, to make money, knowing that they can also lose. In fact, that if you try to open an option trading account or anything like that, the assumption is that you are opening it up because you want to make some money. In other words, you want to speculate. And if you've ever tried to do that, the brokerage house, okay, would always tell you or indicate in some agreement or somewhere on their website that these things are very risky and an investor should not, okay, um, engage in any transaction where the investor cannot afford to lose the amount of money involved. If you think, for example, that losing, okay, would bankrupt you, then you probably shouldn't invest. So they do warn you, because it's a very, very, iffy thing. Okay. So having mentioned that, let's go to our quickly run through this. Now, we actually looked at a forward hedge before in a way when we looked at the hedging tech at the forward rates. But of course, what we're doing now is actually using them to hedge. So along comes this article, right? And useful. Now, as I said, you've also got this one, which actually shows you in detail how the figures are worked up and whatnot, and refers to your selling rate and buying rate. So everything is there for you. Okay. And we will refer to this in between, but just to get it done quickly, let's take a look at this. Um, so these are the risks. I said our main concern is with transaction risk, and notice some of the options, especially dealing with transaction risk, we may only deal in home currency. Of course, this may not be possible because, like the British firm, it may wish anytime it sells goods, okay, it may wish to invoice the let's say it's a US firm in sterling. But if the norm in the business, okay, is to invoice in dollars, well, we have no choice. But left up to the British firm, they would obviously prefer to invoice in their own currency. But they know it's certain, you see. Of course, we may choose to do nothing. There's no rule that says you have to hedge. Now, we don't normally consider transaction costs in our calculation. Of course, we could, and if it does come up, it's easy enough to deal with, because if you are receiving transaction costs, we'll just take down your receipt. If you're paying, it will take up your cost. But if you choose to not hedge, you would say, but obviously it's risky because you might gamble and say, well, I think the rate will go up, down, whatever, but it may not. Lead in means receive an early, offer a discount, expecting rate to appreciate. Lag in means pay later if currency is depreciating. Lag in may not be a feasible option because normally lag in, since it applies to pain, okay, you might want to delay payment hoping that the rate in fact moves in a different direction. But the problem is, in so doing, um, you may damage your relationship with your supplier because you may be taking back the payment date too much. Matching, which is something you need to know how to do. Okay, matching receipts with payments. Now it's called netting also, and there are two types of netting you need to know about: simple netting, which we see here, and multilateral netting, which is something that you, if the examiner has to bring it, more than likely he'll bring that. Okay. And of course, another way, money and forward, which is what we look at. So really the bona fide hedging techniques covered in this handout are these two here. Now, so remember, what we are looking at here are ways to negate the risk that in the future the exchange rate may move against the firm. So we have bought or agreed a sale now in a foreign currency, okay, but the cash won't be paid or received until a future date. With a forward rate, we are simply agreeing a rate, future rate now. That's all that it is, isn't it? So you go to your bank and you say, look, bank, let's say again, it's the UK firm, and they will be receiving $1 million in 3 months' time. But of course, they don't know what the rate will be then. They can choose to do nothing and say, well, when I receive the $1 million, I'll go to the bank, whatever the spot rate is then, I'll use that. But let's assume they wish to use a forward hedge. They will go to their bank and say, look, bank, in 3 months' time, I'll be giving you $1 million. And I want you to quote me a forward rate. The bank will quote you the forward rate, a 3-month forward rate, but the rate, of course, will be quoted to you today. Now, the fact that the rate is quoted today, it does not mean that you are using the rate today to pay the money over after all the money is being received in 3 months. What it simply means is that you know with complete certainty what your receipt is going to be in 3 months. Because this rate quoted is a locked in rate. That is the rate that will apply in 3 months' time. If you choose not to use that and just gamble a bit, you might say, well, I'll use this actual spot rate in 3 months. And guess what? When you go into the bank in 3 months' time, the spot rate might be good compared to what the forward rate the bank was quoting to you. But then it may also be bad, meaning result in you getting far less sterling. So again, it's up to you, the firm that is. So with a forward rate, we are simply agreeing a future rate now. Okay. Um, Therefore, fixing yourself in against any possible future losses caused by movements in the real exchange rate. However, we also lose out, and this is the point I was making, okay, just now. However, we also lose out if the actual rate moves in your favor, as you have fixed yourself in a forward rate already. But you can't have your cake and eat it, right? I mean, there are other advantages to hedging. When we say removing the uncertainty, let's assume, for example, that this firm, it had bought goods, bought raw material components then, the UK firm. So now it has to pay dollars in 3 months' time. And it decides to use a forward rate. So it knows for sure today what its cost is going to be. Now, these components which it has purchased would be used in its product. And because the firm knows exactly what its cost will be in sterling, it can go ahead and set its price and whatnot and know for sure that its price will cover its costs. But of course, if it does not hedge and it decides to play it by ear and gamble a bit, yes, in 3 months, and it therefore just estimates a cost to input in its pricing process. In 3 months' time, anything can play off. What if the rate moves so much that the component cost actually skyrockets? You see, so there's a commercial advantage in that respect as well, not just purely removing the uncertainty, but as a important byproduct of the removal of the uncertainty is the fact that we can also set our prices and whatnot, um, you know, with more certainty. So in this example, UK importer has to pay $1,000 in a month's time. He takes the forward rate of 1.8 to 1.9. Now remember, the indirect, you will always see in your exam, the lower, the higher. This means $180 for a pound, $190 for a pound. This is the sell rate for the bank. Remember, it's the indirect. This is the buy rate for the bank. The bank then has agreed to sell the dollars to the importer. Now remember, if the bank is selling, we are buying. So we would go to the bank and we would say, look, bank, in 1 month's time, I am going to sell you $1,000. Okay. We will sell dollars. Okay. Sorry. Let me rephrase that. This is P. I was looking at it as receive. Yes, in 1 month's time, okay, we telling bank we will need to buy $1,000 because we need to pay, an invoice, settle an invoice. We need to buy dollars, the bank will therefore sell. That's all that you need to say. We are buying, bank is selling, or we are selling, bank is buying. Now, once it's as easy as that and the transaction is represented in the stated currency, it's just divide. That's all you need to do. So you just need to figure what's happening. You say, for example, well, if we need to buy dollars, bank will sell. And I know bank sells at a lower rate, and I just divide. Once it's the divide rule, it's easy. In the odd situation, though, you may have to use the multiply rule. And that's where it's a little bit more tricky. So when you look at the handout, and of course we'll come across one or two calculations as well, you'll see how to use that. But in 99% of the situations that you will encounter, you will have to divide, which is very easy. Just remember again, indirect system, bank sell low, buy high. If we have to pay $1,000, it means we will have to buy the dollars. If we have to buy the dollars, we look at what the bank will do. The bank will sell. The bank sells at this rate. And as long as the transaction is represented in the stated currency, in most cases it will be, you simply divide by the rate, like in this case the selling rate. So we told here, the bank has then agreed to sell the dollars to the importer. Remember, the bank sells low. The exchange rate will therefore be 1.8. The bank will give the exporter $1,000 in return for 555 pounds. The importer must pay 555. It's as simple as that. Note, If the importer cannot fulfill the forward contract agreed, maybe because he didn't get the goods, the bank will sell the importer and then buy it back. Now, strictly speaking, that's what should happen, because what has happened there is that there is an open contract which needs to be closed out. So that procedure will literally ensure that the transaction, the contract is closed out. The only problem with that transaction is that the bank may end up losing, because it all depends on what the spot rate is at that time. Now, as a result, you know how banks are, they never play to lose. So what would usually happen as well, if the bank chooses to close out the transaction like this, is they may on top of that charge a transaction fee or something of the sort, which would negate any potential loss that they may incur in this procedure. They would still charge the transaction fee if they would make a gain, which of course would double up their situation. So I'm just telling you how it might be in practice. Okay. Now, by the way, let me just show you something. Just bear with me a sec. Yes. When you read through this handout, you will see with this example, okay, I've this is an example as to where the firm which was hedging does not need to, no longer needs to close out the transaction, because in this case the funds were no longer required. This was an importer, and the importer had entered into an arrangement to buy the currency in 2 or 3 months. But then in the scenario, they never got the goods, so they didn't need the money anymore. And this shows you what happens, the procedure, okay, where the bank would make the customer close out the transaction. Okay, so at least you have an example to rely on. Now, as far as I can recall, and I'm not saying it hasn't happened, but as far as I can recall, um, I can't remember a situation where the examiner actually asks you to do this procedure. In fact, I don't think your text has a procedure as well like it. No, again, I might be mistaken if you use the BPP text. But it's useful to know. See, we talk about it as you saw in the yellow handout, but at least here you actually see how, it can be done. Right, so you have some advantages, disadvantages, and all that. Now the money market hedge. Okay, now money market hedge, okay, whether it's been done from an importer's or an exporter's view, would always require procedure. Now, you must know the procedure. If you simply jump into the hedge, okay, in a haphazard way, more than likely you will get it wrong. So the procedure differs slightly if it's an importer as compared to an exporter. But there are similarities. For example, whether it's an importer or an exporter hedging, um, both both sets of procedures would use something called the matching principle. Both sets of procedures rely on money market interest rates, which is why it's called a money market hedge, by the way. Of course, both procedures would ensure that you will know with complete certainty what the outcome will be, because all the input data that goes into the hedge, as with the forward hedge, all the data is known with certainty today. Okay. So there are similarities and there are differences according to whether we are doing it from the viewpoint of an importer or an exporter. See, the basic idea you told here, the money markets are markets for wholesale or large-scale lending and borrowing or trading in short-term financial instruments. Many companies are able to borrow or deposit funds through their markets in the money through their bank in the money market. Now remember, the money market is a descriptive term. You would not usually go down the high street, okay, and see an institution referred to as the money market. Remember, it is the market for the borrowing and lending of short-term funds. Instead of hedging a currency exposure with a forward contract, a company could use the money markets to lend or borrow and achieve a similar result. The basic idea is to avoid future exchange rate uncertainty by making the exchange at today's spot rate instead. This is achieved by depositing or borrowing. It depends on whether you are an importer or an exporter, you see. This is achieved by depositing or borrowing the foreign currency until the actual commercial transaction cash flows occur. Since forward exchange rates are derived from spot rates, why we say that is because remember when I showed you the discounts, premiums, and so forth, everything is based on the spot rate. And money market interest rates, the end result from hedging should be roughly the same by either method. Usually in the exam, it will not be the same. That's why that's the use of the term should. Okay. Now, what you would normally be expected to in the exam, because you will have information which allows you to do, is to do the money market, do the forward, compare both of them, and take the better of the two. So if you're an importer, you will take the one which gives you the lower cost, and if you're an exporter, the one which gives you the higher receipt. And remember, all that you can determine today, and then of course whichever one is better, that is the hedge that would be used. Now I have here, okay, the procedure really kind of fine. I'll try to expand it a bit. Right. Setting up the hedge, future foreign currency, cash flow, payments, and receipts. Payments would mean if you're heading from the viewpoint from the viewpoint of an importer. Receipt would be if you are hedging from the viewpoint of an exporter. Let's take a read of the receipt first. Okay. Now, again, you may know this, but I'd still like to quickly run through it. See, it's like this, right? Let's assume an example I always use, which I think makes it easier to follow the procedure here, is let's assume that you've lent some money to a friend, okay, say $10,000, and the agreement is that he would pay you back in 3 months' time, okay? But upon lending him the money, follow this example closely because it's exactly how a money market hedge works, the essence of it, that is, from the viewpoint of a receipt. See, the fact that you have loaned money to your friend, it means that you have an asset which is maturing in 3 months because obviously he owes you. So if you were to do in some accounts, you would put him as a receivable, right? But after you loaned him the money, just about maybe the same day or so after you loaned him, you realize that you have something has come up and you have a need for that money now. Now, again, I'm just using this, okay, to get the point across. Now, you don't want to go and ask him back for the money because, you realize you all are good friends and you realize that he needs it for some reason. He wouldn't, whatever he has to do would allow him to pay you back in 3 months' time. You don't have any, doubt about that. Okay. So what do? Well, what you can do is this, right? And this is how the money market hedge would work. You will go to your bank today and you'll take out a loan. Okay, now because we are using a simple single transaction, not a foreign currency one, you would take out a loan from your bank. We assume you could take out a loan, or if not, maybe you might use a substitute approach, like maybe use your credit card or something, right? Anyway, and but let's say the loan, you go to the bank and you take out a loan today. But the loan which you will take out would, and by the way, the agreement is you'll pay back the loan in 3 months' time to the bank, which is the same as when you'll be getting the 10,000 back from your friend. But the loan which you will take out today would not be for 10,000. It will be a little bit less. The reason why it will be a little bit less is because you really don't want to be out of pocket. Let's say that you choose to borrow $9,800. The reason why you are borrowing less is because you know over the 3 month period interest will accrue on the loan. And because you know all the rates and whatnot up front, remember the bank will tell you what the rates are, okay? You have calculated that the interest you will have to pay back on the loan is $200. Now again, this can be calculated. So you'll borrow 9,800 and you know that in 2 months time, you'll need to pay back the bank 10,098 plus 2 interest. And when you receive the money in 2 months, 3 months time from your friend, you'll use it to pay back the loan plus the interest accrued. The money which you took out today as a loan, you can use it for the intended purpose. Now that is exactly how a money market hedge operates from the viewpoint of an exporter, except that we will be dealing in a foreign currency. So in this case, it works like this. The UK exporter has sold goods to the US firm. Note sold. Worth, okay, the invoice is say $500,000. Now clearly the fact that the UK firm has sold goods to the US firm and the invoice is in dollars, it means the UK firm has to hedge. And it's due in 3 months' time. What they will do, because remember, they wish to remove all the uncertainty and they wish to know exactly what the outcome of the hedge is going to be today, and they can know. And there's an additional bonus when using a money market hedge. You will actually be able to get the funds today. Because what they will do is just like what you did in the example. They will go to their bank and say, look, bank, I need to take out a loan today. Now, never mind, it's a British firm. They can take out a loan in US dollars with their own bank, because the bank obviously um, knows that the firm would need working capital and all these things, and this is a customary thing. So they go to their bank and say, look, bank, I need to take out a loan today in dollars. But the amount which the firm will borrow would be less than 500,000 because they will have to pay back dollars interest. So the amount to be borrowed today, okay, might let's say be $497,000. Let's just say that. And the interest which will accrue, which can be calculated, will be 300, and actually 3,000 in this case, 497,000, right? And it will be used to pay back the loan plus the interest in 3 months. When the firm takes the loan out today, as I said, there's an additional bonus for the money market hedge in that the proceeds can be immediately converted into sterling and they have the use of the funds today. Now notice has to be converted into sterling because it is very important, and this is why we say the matching principle applies, because the loan which is being taken out, okay, must be matched with the amount as well as the currency of the receipt due in 3 months' time. They owe dollars, they will take out a loan in dollars. But of course, being a British firm, as soon as the loan is taken out, it will be converted into sterling. And that's how the hedge operates. Now, in case you're saying, well, instead of doing all that, why not use a forward hedge? Yes, that is why the examiner will expect you to use a forward hedge as well and you to compare. Because the only problem is you will be comparing a money market hedge where the amount was received today with a forward hedge where the amount will be received in 3 months. And if you recall the procedure that you should know, you would need to take that into account and adjust for the time value of money, because a receipt of $497,000 today in dollars, well, of course, we'll need to convert it into pounds, okay? A receipt today is not the same as the same amount of money received in 3 months' time. Money has a time value. So that's why we need to adjust for the, differential, which we see just now in the example. It's like that. Borrow an amount today in the currency due, matching a liability such that the loan with loan interest is equal to the future asset receipt. The loan proceeds are immediately sold at the spot rate, and the domestic currency received represents the amount from the transaction. Domestic would be, in my case, in the example using the UK firm sterling. Now, this last step is how we match. It is assumed that the firm can deposit the domestic currency received at the domestic money market deposit rate. Because what we will do, just to match against the forward, okay, when we receive the sterling, having converted it, sold the dollars back to the bank, we assume it can be deposited at the sterling deposit rate for a 3 months period, if it's 3 months. And that would enable us to have a valid comparison, or make a valid comparison with the forward, which of course will be received in 3 months. Now, with the payment, it's the opposite, isn't it? Because with a payment, remember, you now are hedging from the viewpoint, your firm from the viewpoint of an importer, and you have to pay an amount in 3 months' time, or whatever it is. So notice again, we use the matching, but it's opposite. Here we borrowed an amount today. Here you deposit an amount today in the currency owed. Let's say the dollars, British firm owes US firm. Matching an asset with a liability such that the deposit with interest will equal to the future liability. You see, it's like creating a fund then, okay, which will be used to pay off the future liability. So if you owe $500,000, what you're going to do is deposit less than $500,000 today, because the amount deposited will accrue interest over the 3 months, and at the expiration of the 3 months, you'll simply take it out and use it to settle your liability. Now you have to work out the amount to be deposited today by just working backwards. For example, if you know the deposit rate will be say 5% per annum, of course you'll have to equate it to a 3 monthly rate. And if you know what that rate is, okay, all you need to do is to work backwards to find the principal, the amount that you will deposit today, as we'll see in the example. Now, having worked that out, it means that you're going to have to find the money somewhere. Remember, what you are depositing is the foreign currency. So the second step says to make the deposit, the funds must be bought at the spot rate today, and the cost is the cost today. So it's as though you go into the bank and you buy in the currency to make the deposit. Now you have to work out step one first. Sometimes what students tend to do, they rush into the procedure and try to do step two first. You can't do that. You need to first figure out how much you're going to deposit. And the amount you are going to deposit is dependent on the amount that you owe. So you need to find that first. Step 3, the funds used to make the purchase are assumed to be borrowed for the relevant period. And the reason why we should put in step 3 here is to also do a comparison, as we see in the example. This is like step 3 here, except rather than using a deposit rate, we use a borrowing rate for the relevant period, and the cost of borrowing is the domestic currency money market borrowing rate. On the future date, the deposit and interest rate, step 1, I used to settle the invoice. And I have the Excel illustrations, which you have on the Excel sheet. So you look at it in a minute. You have the advantages, disadvantages. Now this speaks about futures, but this is a very basic, as I said, this handout also is what I give to my F9 students. And this is all they need to know about futures. So this part does not apply to you. In fact, let me take it out, because I think I put here revision. Good. So let me move this. Next thing you look at is say, whoopee, I don't need to know how to do any futures calculation. Isn't that great? Well, I'm afraid it's not great. So take out this. You needn't worry, right? What I'll do is I'll just replace the handout on the Google Classroom site with this one. So, and also with any adjustments I made on the other one. So at least you'll have whatever we spoke about today. Right, so you have all that now, and of course a bit of options and so forth, but very straightforward things. Okay. Oh, by the way, in this handout, With them, I also speak about interest rate risk because they need to know very little on it as well. That's why you see it's so skimpy. And it does describe an FRA, so at least it could be useful for you as well to see it there. But of course, we look at it in more detail. Okay, now let's take a quick look at this example, okay, to see how it works. Because there's something additional you need to know about your money market hedge that they don't. All right, and it's on this handout. Now, this handout though is not the one which I give to them. This handout is a revision handout I use specifically for F9 because there are one or two things. I'm sorry, for P4 because there are one or two things in this handout that they don't need to know. For example, this. Right? They don't need to know about that. And even with the money market hedge. Okay, now let's take a look here. So we could go through this quickly. We've looked at the procedure and all that, but there's something important I need to remind you of. This first one is being done from the viewpoint of an exporter. You've been given the spot rate and you've been given 3-month forward rates. Now, the reason why you've been given the 3-month forward rates is because I keep saying a question would normally expect you to do the forward hedge and compare as well. Before we go on, remember earlier on that other handout, the toolbox handout, I said that there are two legal ways of estimating a forward rate, and the two legal ways using discounts and premium are rates of appreciation and depreciation, which would also include using IRPT, right? Now, what I meant by saying legal, which would imply there is something illegal as well. What I mean by the term illegal here is this. See, in P4, the examiner may not give you any information whatsoever to work out a forward rate, but he wants you to work out a forward rate. And when I say does not give you any information, for example, he does not give you discounts and premiums, that's how you saw it on the handout before. He does not give you rates of appreciation or depreciation as how you saw it on the handout before. And he does not give you any information related to IRPT. So you have to, well, get your creative juices flowing. Furthermore, you may be doing a question and he does not give you a spot rate in future either. Neither does he give you any PPPT information or anything of the sort for you to work it out. And in that case, as with a missing forward, you need to use whatever information is given to you. And I'll show you how to do that. Okay. But many times, those things would be missing. And I think one of the reasons why he does that is because, you know what? In reality, not all the information would be available. And he wants to put you in that position then, okay, to see exactly, you know, what you will do. So let's take a look anyway. We have all the information here. So this firm PLC, of course, the firm would make it clear it's a British firm, but you know, in my examples, when you see PLC, it's a British firm. Grizzly PLC has invoiced its customer for $500,000 on 3 months credit. The current data has been given. Remember, we use money market rates. The deposit rate, the loan rate, 7%, 9%, 5%, 8%. 7% and 9% means the deposit and loan rate respectively for dollar. Now remember, rates are quoted per annum, which means if this British firm wants to deposit dollars in his bank, it would get 7% per annum. If it needs to take out a dollar loan rate, okay, a loan, sorry, denominated in dollars, it will have to pay 9%. Those are the rates applicable for sterling. But you must remember, as I go on to tell you here, rates are generally quoted on a per annum basis. So if you are carrying out a 3-month transaction as you are here, you cannot use, okay, those rates as given there because those are per annum. You need to actually adjust them to make them a 3-month equivalent. And it's always like that. Don't get misled by the fact that the rate might say these are 3-month money market rates. What this means is these are 3-month money market rates per annum. You need to actually find the 3-month money market rate itself. So Since money market rates are normally quoted per annum, they must be converted. Example, the 3-month equivalent for sterling would be found by taking 8 and dividing it by 4. Literally we're saying, well, this is the 12-month rate. Okay, we need the 3-month rate. Okay, so divide by 4 and then divide by 4. And don't forget this. This is important. All right. And usually when you do that, the rate, of course, would be quite small. Procedure: Guzzi would first invoice their customer for $500,000 on 3 months credit. Guzzi then creates a liability. Remember, the exporter would always take out a loan today in the currency, but less than $500,000. At the same time, against the asset maturing in 3 months. The amount borrowed is in the same currency as the asset, that is dollars, and must be an amount such that the sum borrowed with interest must amount to the asset to be received in 3 months. Now, since it's dollars, notice the dollar loan rate is 9%, and we have to divide 9 by 4 for reasons explained here. That gives us 2.25%. So, see, you know this, and you know this. So all you've got to do is to work backwards to find out what the principal is. And it works out to be 488,998. Now what that means, therefore, is that Guzzi is going to borrow from his bank $488,998. But since Guzzi is a British firm, they don't want dollars, they want sterling. So this is sold immediately and represent the sterling receipt from the deal. And since it's sold immediately, that is, the bank will buy it then. Notice, they sell, bank buys. Of course, this is the spot buying rate for the bank. That is what it will be converted at. And they will get £313,059 in their hands today. When the $500,000 is received, it is used to pay off the loan and the interest. Now, watch this. I told you that the question would normally expect you to work out a forward hedge as well. An alternative would have been to use a forward hedge and to sell the 3-month asset. Okay, and to sell the 3-month asset using the forward rate to yield. So in other words, alternatively, we could have gone into the bank that we be in Grizzy and say, look, bank, okay, I'll have $500,000 come in 3 months. I'll need to sell it. Bank will therefore buy, and it's the forward. Bank will quote you a rate of 158.80. So we could have used that and collect 314.8 in 3 months. Now this is the interesting part. Do you use the money market hedge and receive £313,059? And by the way, at this point, when you come to compare, you have to compare in your own currency. So, here your own currency is sterling. Do you use the money market hedge and collect 313 and 59 today? Or do you use the forward hedge and collect 314,861 in 3 months? And the answer is, you cannot openly compare these two figures because this is in 3 months and this is today. Now you saw on the handout just now, when doing it from the viewpoint, the yellow handout, from the viewpoint of an exporter, there'll come a point in time where you need to match this and you pretend that this could be borrowed. You pretend that this can be deposited for the relevant period. As long as you're hedging from an exporter's view, it comes as though you have the money in your hand and you'll deposit it. And the purpose of that is just a match. 313 today, what is the equivalent in 3 months' time? Which is better, the money market hedge where 313 and 59 is received now, or the forward hedge where it is received in 3 months? 314, that is. Figures cannot be compared unless adjusted. We either compound the 313 and 59 forward or discount the 314 back. Well, logically it seems so, but the accepted approach is to compound on the assumption that by using the money market hedge, the company could place the money on deposit if it wished, which is what you saw in the yellow handout. So forward hedge, money hedge today, no, that is sterling. I'll deposit that for 3 months. Notice the rate I'm using is sterling deposit, adjusting for the 3 month. And guess what? it works out to be more. And in this case, the money market hedge is the better one. Okay. Now, whenever you, and this is the part that you need to know that a student, a F9 student wouldn't. Whenever you are hedging from the viewpoint of an exporter, you may have to work out what we call a lead and hedge. Remember you saw just right, look at this here, this yellow handout. Yeah, see, lead in, receiving early, offer discount, right? Okay, good. So whenever you are hedging from the viewpoint of an exporter, you may create a lead and hedge instead. Now, what a lead and hedge means is this. You know, of course, this is rather than using the um, money market hedge, you decide to use a lead and hedge. Now, if you decide to use a lead and hedge, you will not use the money market hedge. Neither will you use the forward hedge because you are using a lead and hedge. But in order to decide whether you ought to use a lead and hedge, you first need to simulate a transaction with the better of the two hedges, meaning the forward and the money. So it comes as though before you attempt this calculation, remember nothing has happened as yet, nothing is cast in stone as yet. All this is being done before you decide on your hedge. What you'll do is you'll do just like what we did before. You are hedging from the viewpoint of an exposure. You'll work out the money hedge as we did before. You'll work out the forward hedge as you did before. You'll choose the better of the two, right down as how we did it to the end. And in our case, of course, the money hedge was the better hedge. Having done that, what you then doing is you're working out a lead and hedge. And as I said, you must work out the two, simulate, as though you're going with one or the other, choose the best one. Now, what a lead and hedge means is this. You'll go to the customer, right? Like in this case, the US customer. Let's say the US customer, the person you deal with is John in the firm. And you say, look, John, I'd like to offer something, okay? The arrangement is you will pay us in 3 months' time. But how about if you pay today instead? Of course, John would instantly say, no, I don't like that option. Because obviously, if you can pay the same amount in 3 months, why will you want to pay today? But then if you tell John, here what, I'm prepared to give you a discount, an early payment discount to get you to pay today, immediately then. Now, assuming John has cash flow and cash flow is not a problem, John may consider that. Say, well, okay, you give me a discount, I might go that way, right? What you have to work out here is the maximum discount you'd be willing to offer John to get their company to pay you today. In other words, we are working it out from our point of view. Whether they choose to accept it or not is not your problem in the exam. Remember, you are hedging. You are the exporter. Okay. So what we have to work out, and the reason why we say a maximum is because you see, once we get this, we will probably want to offer him anything less than this. But this is a maximum. The other reason why we work at a maximum is because we need a figure to work with, a specific figure. So, remember at this point, you've already determined the money market hedge was the better one. So let's see. A strategy of lead-in the payment may be used. Lead-in means asking the customer to pay now and forego the credit period. Use an example 4. The customer is unlikely to pay now unless he gets a discount. The maximum discount to be given, and this is why it's called the maximum, remember we'd want to give less than this, would be where the sterling outcome from the customer leading the payment was the same as the sterling outcome from the money market hedge, where 313 and 59 is received immediately. Now, another way of saying that is from the better hedge then. In other words, this money market was the better. By the way, note what I said here in the last sentence. The money market, or the last line, the money market hedge where 313 and 59 is received immediately. See, when we did this comparison just now to decide whether we ought to use money or forward, we compounded this and we got 316, and on the basis that I decided money was the better one because we had to compare like with like. But whenever you are working out a discount, a maximum, remember what you are doing is you are offering the customer the option to pay you today at a lower price, which means any figure that you use to work out that discount must be a today figure. That is why we are not using 316, we are using 313. So this is how we work out the discount. Remember what we're saying is this: the maximum discount, I'll read back that line, to be given would be where the sterling outcome from the customer lead-in was the same as the sterling outcome from the better hedge, which in this case was the money. So in other words, what we want to work out is this: how much in dollars when received today and sold to the bank, in other words, and converted into sterling, will amount to 313,059. That's what we are saying. That's why we say this is the maximum discount we're working. Actually, we want to offer less. See, you see. Remember, the customer is going to pay you in dollars. So you say, how much in dollars when received today and sold to the bank? So the bank will buy them. Okay, will give us exactly 313,059. Now, watch this. I will take 313.59 and I'll multiply it by 156.20 to get this. Let me tell you why. Let's go to the rates. These are the spot rates, right? Remember, when you receive this money today, these dollars, you will sell it to the bank, meaning the bank will buy it from you. And remember, the buying conversion rate for the bank will be 156.20. That is why we had to use 156.20 to find out. It's as though we're working backwards then, okay? But we know when we get that figure and present it, this is the way that will be used. This is important. You cannot work out the discount to the customer using sterling. You have to work out the discount to the customer using dollars, because guess what? You're not going to tell the customer, oh, okay, pay me 300,000 pounds today. Remember, the customer is paying dollars. So you need to tell the customer a figure in dollars. If the customer was to pay 488,998, this amounts to a credit, a discount of 2.2%. Yeah, because remember the regular figure is 500,000, so this will be the discount. This is the maximum discount, as offering a greater discount means the exporter receives less sterling than he would from using a money market hedge and the customer paying the full invoice. And this is an important calculation. Now, you don't see it coming up that much, but you need to know it, okay? And you know how it goes in the exam. 48 plus 2 is 50. So you see, you cannot afford to leave any stones unturned. Okay. Right. Now quickly, importer, we went through this. There's no lead-in hedge to be worked out here. Procedure for importer, we went through the procedure. Remember, this is the one where you will create a deposit today. So we create an asset now, which with interest would equate to the liability in future as the amount we owe. The asset, which is a deposit, to create the asset, the currency must be bought at spot now. Remember, we said that. Of course, you can work out how much you're going to deposit, as we'll see in the example. The cost of the importer, the spot cost. Now, this means uncertainty is avoided as the amount of the liability is known at present. Very simple here. Angus owes September Inc. $1.5 million in 3 months. So a British firm, August PLC owes September Inc. PLC, British September Inc. US $1 million due in 3 months. Spot rate forward. So notice British firm owes US firm. X must be an asset, the amount of $1.5 million in 3 months. So what we're going to do is deposit. Notice the deposit sterling dollar rate is being used, but as usual we have to adjust because it's a 3-month transaction, and that works to 1451,906. So we need to deposit 1451,906 today, and in 3 months time it will amount to 1.5 million. Of course, when the 1.5 million, okay, remember we are hedging from the viewpoint of an importer. We need $1.5 million. So when we deposit this money today and it gathers interest, it will go to the $1.5 million in 3 months time. What this has achieved, this has given us with certainty exactly what our cost is. Remember, everything here you know today, and as usual we'll compare it with the forward. In order to make the deposit, we need to buy it. We use the spot cost today. We buy, bank will sell, and it's 985,613. That is our sterling cost. We will compare it with the forward. The forward hedge using the rate given on top. In 3 months time, our forward cost will be 989,185. Now the today cost is 985,613. So looking at it, it appears as though the money market hedge is the better hedge. But remember that 985,613 is a cost today. The 989,185 is a cost in 3 months. You can't compare both of them. In order to match, we assume that the 985,613, which you used, you being the company, to purchase the dollars, we assume that that money has to be borrowed. And in practical terms, for example, the firm may use its overdraft to raise the sterling which it used to purchase the dollars. And that's the reason for us, using a borrowing rate here. So just remember, when it comes to the matching, an importer always matches using a borrowing rate, but an exporter always matches using a deposit rate. The fact that it works up to be 10-12, it means the forward hedge is the better one. Obviously, we'd want to pay less, therefore the forwards. And so these two examples, and with all the explanations, has put us now in a position where we've looked at all the simple things. I mean, we went at it quickly because, as I said, really it is like revision. And what now we can start in our remaining time is to look at the more advanced hedging techniques. Now, because this is where it gets interesting. Let's go to our flow chart here. So we've got futures, options, swaps, options, there are variations and all this. Now, we would start by looking at futures hedges, but we're not going to actually get into any calculations and whatnot. Let's put things in the correct perspective. I told you, earlier in today's session that ideally a company which is hedging against transaction risk should not use an imperfect hedging technique because of the additional risk created. I mean, after all, there's a conflict there, isn't it? Because if the purpose of this procedure is to hedge against risk, why will you then want to hedge using a method which creates additional risk? That means you are going further into risk. But as I said, it does give the treasurer or whosoever is hedging the opportunity to make some more money for the firm. Now, as long as they are aware of that risk, then fine. I'll tell you something too. For firms like that, i.e., normal trading firms, which where the treasurer has decided to hedge using an imperfect hedging technique, especially where the exposure, okay, is fairly substantial. And in fact, even if it's less, the fact that you may be departing from the norm, unless it's within your specification. So maybe unless you're given, as the treasurer, okay, you're given the freedom to hedge using an imperfect hedging technique within certain limits, fine. But if it's anything above the limit, or indeed if you were not given those specifications, any decision to hedge using an imperfect hedging technique should be a decision at the highest level, which is board level. Because I said in the past, you're playing with the firm's longevity here. Things like these have taken down firms before. So that's important. Now, these hedging techniques, and by the way, a currency swap cannot be used to hedge transaction risk the way in which we've been looking at it from an importer or an exporter. A swap is normally used in relation to loans, but it is normally considered when looking at hedging techniques. However, again, yes, I put it there, but really, as I said, you do not use currency swap to hedge against transaction risk associated with normal trading transactions. And of course, when I show you the procedure with a swap, you'll see exactly what I mean. So if you have to write about it, and this is why I'm clarifying it, don't go writing to the examiner and telling him that, or the marker, that currency swaps can also be used to hedge, normal transaction risk. Okay, that's why I'm making that clear here. Right. That's why I also put this thing down in at the bottom and so forth, but we'll talk about that. Okay, so just temporarily focus on these futures, options, and these hedging techniques are called derivative hedging techniques. What is a derivative to start with? You would have come across the term in your P2, right? So what is a derivative? Firstly, there are different types of derivatives. There are financial derivatives, which is what we are looking at here. Financial derivatives, for example, include currency futures, currency options, interest rate futures, interest rate options, stock index futures, and stock related options. Those are financial derivatives. Non-financial derivatives, on the other hand, okay, can include futures and options as well, but related to all other forms of commodities, okay, which are not considered to be financial. And when we say commodities, for example, you may have heard about coffee bean futures, okay, orange juice futures, cocoa futures, futures for livestock like cattle and whatnot, futures for wood, different types of wood. See, almost anything which is traded in the open market has a related derivative. And the derivatives, therefore, are not restricted to just currencies or interest rates or stocks. In fact, the use of derivatives initially, okay, were mainly for trading commodity type futures and options and whatnot, not currencies. Trading in currency futures is a fairly recent thing in the historical scheme of things. It only started in about 1971 or 72, which is fairly recent compared to the history. Okay, whereas trading in commodity futures, okay, had been around a lot longer before that. But they've all got something in common though, and that is, if you choose to trade in a futures, okay, for example, which is a derivative, you are not trading in the actual item itself. So if, for example, somebody chooses to trade just for speculation, and remember, these things are normally used for speculation. Now, the difference, of course, is you are using it to hedge, which is a bit more complex. But let's assume, because you need to understand how it can be used to speculate first before how it can be used to hedge. Hedging is just going one step further. But puts and calls, yes, would relate to, So it's like this, right? You wish to make some money out of trading in currency futures. You have no interest in buying or selling the currency itself. You simply want to trade in the derivative, which is the futures. Now, if a simpler example to use might be, say, with coffee. You're looking at the price of coffee today. Coffee is the instrument, you understand, the main thing. The coffee bean futures would be the derivative. But you're looking at the price of coffee today, and you realize coffee is traded, and let me just use a figure, okay? I'd say it's normally not expressed in just £5 and £10. It might be in stacks of 5,000. So let's just say the price of one contract, because normally futures are expressed in contracts, okay, is say $10,000, right? Today, good. Now that's coffee. The price of an equivalent amount of coffee today is $10,000. That's the item itself. Now you expect the price of coffee to go up because you've done your analysis and you realize that later on this year, okay, the weather conditions are expected to be such that it may hamper the coffee crop. Maybe it would be frosty then. So the price of coffee will go up. Now you want to make some money, but you don't want to buy the coffee now, and when the price goes up, sell it back, because you're not trading in coffee. In fact, you have no room to store coffee. Neither do you have the inclination or time to do that. You just want to make money. So what's the next best bet? Use coffee bean futures. So what you'll do is you'll enter the market today and you'll simulate a transaction as though you were buying the coffee itself. You'll buy the coffee bean futures, which is a paper transaction. And then let's assume that, okay, you had bought into September coffee bean futures, which, as I will show you when we look at the handout, but in relation to currencies, means you can trade in September coffee bean futures anytime between now and September. So let's assume that you realize that the price of coffee has been rising because the frosty conditions apparently are being played out, and the price of coffee itself has gone up. Because coffee bean futures are derivatives, it means the price of coffee bean futures would also go up. And at that point, what you decided does not have to be until September. You see, the good thing about futures, anytime between now and September, you can reverse the transaction by closing it out. So maybe this happens in July. You step into the futures market. You had initially bought coffee bean futures. You close out by selling coffee bean futures. The price of coffee itself has gone up by that time, meaning the price of coffee bean futures have also gone up, because it being a derivative means if the price of the main instrument goes up, it will also go up, not necessarily by the same amount. You therefore make a gain on the futures. Now, that's how trading in commodity futures operate, where the trader has no interest in owning the item itself. Now, you might be saying, but I thought this thing was risky. What you have told me so far does not in any way reflect risk. After all that we are doing is buying the opening futures transaction, okay, and sitting around and waiting for the price to go up. I mean, that's not risky. And I agree with you, which is why one of the things I have to show you, because you need to know this, is how or where the risk lies. And this, of course, is what I'll show you, on Monday. But you see, coming back to it, in our case here, our meaning back to the currencies, remember something. we are not speculating. We are hedging against transaction risk. And if we choose to use currency futures to hedge against transaction risk, remember, we need the currency itself. For example, if we are an importer hedging using currency futures, we need to buy the currency itself as well. Now, we're not using forwards, we're not using money market. But at some point, unlike the situation where somebody is only speculating, which is where they don't need to handle the item itself, they just need to trade in paper, the futures, okay? We at some point will need to have the currency. We can't pay, you see, we cannot pay for our goods with futures. We need to pay for our goods with the money itself. And what that means is whenever we are carrying out a futures hedge, there are two sets of transactions to be carried out. One, the futures transaction, two, the what we call the cash market transaction, which is where we'll actually buy or sell the currency according to what we're doing. If all that we were doing was speculating, we would only carry out the futures transaction. So this is where we'll continue, okay, on Monday. All right, we'll get straight into the futures. Okay, now what I would like you to do is this. One of the handouts, okay, which I put up, hang on a sec. Okay, this is on the it's on the it's in the Google Classroom, and you will actually see it labeled as foreign exchange risk advanced, and most of these handouts are there. Now what I would like you to do for me for Monday's class is this is just the PDF version of this one. I put up the PDF version. I'd like you to read through the futures markets. Okay, there's only one PDF, so you read through that. Now you may not understand certain things if you're doing this thing for the first time. It doesn't matter, still read it through. And then I'd like you this handout, which is also a PDF document, which is our main handout that I put together, the foreign exchange risk 2. I'd like you to read up the futures, because it starts off with futures. Now again, you may not follow it. It doesn't matter. Bear in mind when you read in this handout, we are hedging against transaction risk, and you'll see two transactions therefore, which is explained. You'll see the futures transaction and you'll see the cash market transaction, which is of course what we need to carry out since we are dealing in the currency itself. So do that, okay? That's all I need you to do for Monday. Monday I will actually show you, I'll go through this with you, which shows you where the risk comes about, which you need to know. But all I want you to do is, as I said, just if you can read through those two, okay? So that's it for tonight. You have your work cut out for you over the weekend. Just work on that, and we'll meet as usual, okay, on Monday. So have a good weekend, and see you then. Okay, so good night to all.